continuing a session at 1-2 horse on Full Tilt Poker. One of the nice parts about playing stud games is it's easy to sit out and sit back in whenever you feel like it. We're playing stud high-low right now. It's the third hand of stud high-low at this table. I got 3-6-8 rainbow. Now in Raz, it's the marginal hand, and stud high-low, it's not a great hand to play against a high hand. So in this situation, I think you should fold it, especially with these other dead low cards. Don't really think the jack is stealing. They shouldn't be anyway. So I'll let him pick it up. If I was in the big blind, if I was in the bring-in and I had already put in a quarter, I might pay another 75 cents to see the next card to see what happened. But here, I don't really like my hand, and if one of the other low cards play, I really don't like my hand. Now deuces is kind of a trouble hand in stud high-low. Can get you in a lot of trouble. If I wasn't the bring-in, I wouldn't call. And it's probably a marginal hand here to call with in the first place. Now the ace caught a queen. I caught a low card, giving me 3 to a low plus my pair of deuces. Now it's possible that the ace just was continuation betting and has a low draw. Now I have a pair and a low draw. I like my hand. I'm going to raise here for a couple of reasons. One, I'm probably not less than 50% to win anyway. And second, I can control the betting on 6th Street. I can check if I want to check, if I catch a bad card, and I can bet if I don't. And otherwise, if I catch a low card like I did, my opponent might just check to me at that point when I'm ahead. I made 2 pair and a low, and my opponent had aces and tens. So 9 deuce 3, not playable hand here. The 9 is a killer in stud high-low. In Raz, you can sometimes play with it. Stud high-low, it's just a hand you're going to give up. So my favorite game, it depends on my opponents. Stud high-low is usually one of the top favorite. Stud high-low is usually one of my favorite games. Omaha is usually my next favorite game. But it also depends on my opponents. Problem when you're playing live is that the stud high-low hands can take a long time sometimes, especially if you have people that aren't used to the game and dealers that aren't used to it. Online it's great. It doesn't take any time to split the pot, and it plays pretty fast, so I like it a lot. Now I got king jack 6, and if this was stud high and it had been folded to me, I would raise almost all the time. In this case, in stud high-low, you do a lot less stealing unless you have an ace. And the reason, of course, is that the bring-in is way more likely to actually have a hand to defend against you. Now, one thing to notice with the stud hands on Full Tilt Poker, it's like in real life, the players are allowed. In fact, it's common practice for good players to shuffle their down cards so you don't know what card they got on the river. And so when you use the last hand feature, the river cards are going to be shuffled. You're not going to know what they got in the river. In this case, it might look like she hunt started with jack 10-8, but she could have started with 10-10-8 too. And for max power, we don't know if max power started with 2-4-8 or 4-4-8. Yeah, if you happen to play stud live, I recommend mixing your down cards a little bit, trying to make it harder for your opponents to tell what you started with. That makes it a little bit harder for them to get a read on your play. And when you're playing online and the cards are shuffled for you, you want to go and and you got to look at the down cards and try and figure out what do you think your opponent started with. And sometimes there's more than one likely possibility. Sometimes you just can't really know for sure, and sometimes it's completely obvious what they must have started with. Well, I got 2 5s right here with an 8. I'm going to raise it. Hopefully, I wouldn't be unhappy just to pick up the blinds. I didn't really notice that she hunts brought it in for the maximum, but if I did, I would have raised anyway. There are a couple of reasons people bring it in for the maximum. I almost never do it, except in certain tournament situations. I might. In this case, she hunts down to $2, so it doesn't really mean that much. Often they'll do it when they have a small pair, and in this case they did, and that's why I would have re-raised anyway with the 5s. I made a full house and 5 cards and I had her drawing dead. So dead to quad fours, or like jacks full, runner, or something like that. Now, there are a lot of great mixed game players out there. Phil Ivey is probably one of the best players. A lot of people know him as a no-limit hold'em tournament player, but he got his start in Atlantic City playing a lot of stud. So he's really fundamentally first a limit stud player, and he's done very well picking up no-limit hold'em. There are a lot of other great stud players, great horse players out there. Not a lot of them that you necessarily will see on TV because they show on television the no-limit hold'em. And you need to change the way you play a lot when you play limit games, especially when you play horse, when you play mixed games with where there are split pots. A lot of players are used to bluffing a lot in no-limit hold'em, and you can't get away bluffing so much in limit poker, especially in games like stud high low. There are, of course, situations where you can get away with bluffing it, but it takes a real expert. You have to have a lot of experience and to recognize in situations when you can bluff. Now, you can bluff on 3rd Street, of course, and 4th and 5th, but once your opponent keeps calling you down, it's much harder. They've got 9-10 offsuit, back to hold'em. Now, 9-10 offsuit, I would have played it if I was on the button and everybody had folded to me, but early position, it's not a playable hand. Now, if I was suited, 9-10 suited, you can justify playing that if you're the first one in. It's not such a great hand. It's not as nice. It's not as good a hand as when you're playing no limit hold'em, 9-10 suited, because you can win a much bigger pot. And here you can only win a few bets, maybe 10, 20 times the big blind. But in a no limit hold'em, you can win 50, 100 times the big blind if you flop a big hand. And it's just not that likely you're going to flop a big hand to make it right to play in limit hold'em. But being suited does add a lot of value. What it does, one big thing it adds is a lot of semi-bluff opportunities. A lot of times when you can raise the flop and pick up the pot, raise the turn to pick up the pot, or gives you extra outs to call, and then you might hit a pair, which you wouldn't have called if you weren't suited and didn't have the flush draw. So being suited helps you a lot in playing the hand, even though it won't help you win the hand as much, but it will help you get to the point where you can win the hand. And that means a lot in poker. Some people say they think suited connectors are overrated, suited hands are overrated, but I think most people actually underrate suited hands. And people underrate suited hands both in no limit and in limit hold'em. Now in limit, often what you're doing when you got suited hands and you flop a flush draw or a straight draw, you're going to be raising a lot. You're going to get a lot of semi-bluffs, and it's going to give you extra outs that you can continue on and give you more chance to win the hand. Every out magnifies every other out because it means that you're more likely to be able to have the right pot odds to call. Now in this situation, I'm in the big blind. There's one raise to me. I'm calling almost every hand in that situation. And the flop wasn't really very good. I have a backdoor flush draw. But, I'm not even sure if my king is going to be good if I hit a king. I have Jack 3 offsuit. Not a premium hand. If Redmond folds, though, I would think about raising, but I'm not playing this hand out of position, even though I already have a small blind in. Not for the raise. So for the 1-2 horse game, if you can win a few big blinds an hour, it's probably a good rate. $5 an hour would be a good rate. I think if you're playing 1,000, 2,000, that'd be $5,000 an hour. That's pretty good money. Obviously, you're not going to get rich playing $1, $2, but you're playing this more for entertainment and learning purposes than you are to try to make money. And I think a really good player probably could earn $10, $20 an hour You're also going to be playing multiple tables probably, which is hard to do playing horse because you want to be paying attention to all the up cards when you're playing the stud games, and also you want to pay attention to what game you're playing when you're playing stud. You don't want to get confused and think you're playing stud high-low when you're playing Raz and be calling with a high hand. And you don't want to be thinking it's Raz when you're playing the stud high. That's the biggest mistake people tend to make. Now I usually don't play more than 2 tables at once, but that's because I usually have a small laptop that I like to carry around all around the house with me, so I can be watching TV or get up and go eat dinner and not have to stop my game. Now I got Jack-10 offsuit. A player raised, second in. My hand should not be good in that spot. Now if I was suited, there's an argument for occasionally 3-betting with Jack-10 suited in that spot, but there really is no reason to do that with an offsuit hand. So I have Ace-7 suited. If it was folded to me, I would raise. I'm going to call here because I feel like I have good control over my opponents. I could raise too. I mean, sometimes when a player limps, it means they got like a small pocket pair or a bad ace or, Jack-10. Raising there, getting heads up to them, and then betting the flop no matter what isn't a bad strategy. Now here, of course, one of the hands I mentioned they might have just crush the flop, Jack-10. I'm not going to continue on with my ace. It's a small pot. This, I think, is a playable hand, pocket kings. The raise under the gun. They're short stacked. I'm going to re-raise. I don't think there's good reason to slow play pocket kings and limit hold'em, or almost anything limit hold'em. I like to 3-bet or fold most of the time, unless I'm in the big blind, sometimes in the small blind. No ace on the flop, no flush, no straight. Good flop for pocket kings. Not a bad turn card probably. Continue to bet. And unless an ace hits, I'm probably going to bet no matter what on the river. And probably going to win this hand. Given that there was no raise, it's unlikely that somebody has a 2-pair. It was ace-king. The ace-king made a bad call on the river. Not necessarily a bad play before then, but on the river, once the other player calls, he can't call. We call that an overcall, and you have to have a much better hand to make an overcall than you do to be the first caller. Because the second player is not bluffing. So that there's no way that you can call with ace high in that spot. That's just a bad call. They were probably frustrated that they had been playing so patiently, and they were down in the last $3 and decided to call there. But that's just throwing away $2. I mean, there is a small chance that the other player had ace-queen in that spot. Okay, now we're playing Omaha. And I was in the small blind, and so I called the limp. And now I've got 2 queens with an ace on board, 3 to a low. I mean, there's very little chance I'm going to win any piece of this pot. No chance I win the low half, actually. Now I have ace-10, 5, 6. It's not a great hand, and I'm going to fold it against raise. If it was folded to me, I would probably raise with this hand. And I mean, the reason is I'm going to be playing about 35% or so of my hands in that spot, and that's right in that range. The 5-6 being suited really doesn't add much, and now here I would have flopped bottom 2 pair, which really is a dangerous thing in hold'em. In Omaha. It's a great hand in hold'em, usually, but in Omaha, very, very marginal. And in this situation, I almost don't even want to call this flop bet, but I probably would have had to. Okay, here's another marginal hand. In a really loose game, like this one, it's really loose, fairly passive pre-flop and on the flop. You can play a speculative hand like this. It's not a great hand. I'd probably shouldn't be playing it because it really sets a bad example. But, you know, here we saw the flop. There's a deuce on there. I have the second nut low. So the only low that beats me is ace-3. Now here's a question. Do I want to call or do I want to raise? If I raise, which I'm going to raise, I'm trying to get out a player that might just have a 7 or, you know, 5s and deuces or 2 8s, something like that, because I want to make my pair of 7s good. And I'm not too worried about foot and face. They might just have a high or they might just have a low. It's unlikely that they have me right now scooped both ways. They re-raised me. Now I'm just going to just call. And I'm going to just call the turn, and I'm probably, since they raised me on the flop, probably just going to call the river. So flush came, you know, I've got to put them on having me beat at least one way, and if they have ace-3, they might have me scooped. We had the same exact hand. Well, I don't really like their 3-bet in that spot because they really have a marginal hand both ways, and I could very easily have ace-3-7 and have them beat. Given the fact that I just called, then they could continue on the bet. But if I had even if I have ace-3-4, they're in bad shape because I've got the nut low. Unless a 3 comes. If a 3 comes, then we're chopping. If an ace or a 4 come, I'm scooping, or a 6. You know, they could be in pretty bad shape against a lot of hands there. All I need is an ace-3, and they're in pretty bad shape. Especially if I have one overcard. Now, ace-deuce, tray, double suited. One suit. Ace-deuce suited. It's not a bad hand. Problem, though, of course, is that right now it's really looking like it's probably only a low hand. So I didn't want a 3-bet. I want it to be a 3-way pot. And now I pretty much have to give up. My only hope would be a 3 or 2 running clubs. So I got 4, 5, 6 jack. That guy's in pretty aggressive. And when the small blind, I got 50 cents in. I'm going to play a little speculative hand here. And then the big blind raised. So looks like I got myself into a big pot with a subpar hand. And it could be tricky to play. Black number 1 checks the flop. That is very suspicious after 3-betting. There aren't too many hands that I would 3-bet that I don't like that flop. You know, now I really kind of hate my hand, but I'm getting 12.5 to 1. The guy 3-bet and then had to fold. That shows he made a bad 3-bet. And that's not a very good card for the turn. There's a possible flush out, possible full house, and you can have a better low. So now I'm only getting 8 to 1. And it's going to be much harder to win. If I hit a straight, it's less likely to be good. I'm going to give it up. Foot and face, the original razor pre-flop, I would have made a straight, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and had 5, 6 for low. So now I wish I would have called. I would have scooped the pot, but I wasn't in a great situation to be in. And yeah, foot and face, that's a hand that I don't even think I would have played to begin with. And they ended up calling all the way down.